Hi, and welcome. Today I have Michael Oberlaender with us. He's a globally recognized CISO and security leader with more than 35 years experience shaping security and privacy programs across multiple continents. A Heidelberg-trained physicist turned technology innovator. He has led security at 8 global enterprises, authored 3 influential books, and contributed through thought leadership to leading outlets including the Wall Street Journal and Computer World. Known for strategic vision, people and process-driven methodologies, and ability to anticipate emerging risks a decade ahead. Michael has consistently delivered measurable business value and safeguarded organizations in times of transformation and crisis. Nice to have you here, Michael.
Thanks for having me, John. Nice to meet you here.
Yeah, thanks. So we were talking a little bit in the preamble about sort of the emerging risks that are happening now, and and keep in mind that not everybody on the listening may be technical, so we have to explain it like I'm 5 kind of thing. But how do you view the long-term vision for security, considering we have obviously the AI hype train that's going on, but also quantum computing? What would you say about all this? What's going on? Should we be scared?
Yes, you should be scared, because I think what I've seen over the last 30, 35 years is that we as an industry have always basically taken technology into use before doing the necessary key steps, governance around it. Why do we do it? What's the focus? And basically doing the right security and privacy controls before we use the technology. That is an ongoing and recurring scheme. It was the same with cloud. It was the same with IoT. It's now with AI, and it will continue. And with quantum, the big threat is on the horizon as well, right? That means quantum computing becomes so good and so strong that in the near future, near means 10, 15 years, depending who you trust and how the development curve goes. But that in 10, 15 years, there is ability to crack encryption on a quantum scale. And that means that a lot of the today's used encryption algorithms won't work any longer, and that the data that has been encrypted with them may be open to read by the attackers. And that's really a threat, because a lot of companies and government entities rely on secure and confidentially secured data, and that's really serious. So in my view, what we need to do and what we need to change is, before we introduce technology and put it in great use everywhere, we should always do a risk assessment and basically prevent certain things from happening just because we rush it. That is creating a lot of risk. We need to think, why do we want to use and adapt this technology? What's the focus area? What's the use case? And then develop the security and governance controls for that and put that into place before we flip the switch and activate it everywhere. And that is true for AI, has been true for cloud, that has been true for all the other things before.
How do you balance that though? Because I'll just give the AI example from what I see right now, right? So at first they were like, oh, put the pause. They were writing letters and they were saying, let's not get into this right now. Let's slow it down. But now I think everyone just said, listen, it's a race. It's a race to get AGI. Who can get it first controls the world, kind of, megalomaniac kind of thing, right? And they basically have said, we're not going to regulate. You saw I think in the US, they put a thing where you're not allowed to regulate AI for a whole bunch of time. And it seems like everything we do is always reactive. It's not till the house is burning do we start getting a fire extinguisher, So how do you change that mindset with a board, or that where it's literally business results for them? If they don't hit certain metrics, if they don't get certain things done by a certain timeline, it's a race, then it's almost like you got to take the brakes off because you got to get to the bottom of the hill before your competitors. So it's like balancing that as a business. How do you do that?
It's the problem. That is what I try to persuade you and others, right? We can't continue with this race. That's nonsense. That's the wrong approach. That is greed. And we wonder, hey, if you put that greed first, why everything falls apart? That because you are greedy, right? You need to be smart. And that means you need to have certain regulations, what you can do, what you should do, and not we just do it. And then later we find out, oh, we did bad. And so we have to now repair it. And of course, if the genie is out of the bottle, sometimes you can't repair it any further, right? So this is really a problem. The greed needs to go away. And now this is easier said than done. But I think as a government, you have the ability to regulate, and you can say, this is not tolerable. Actually, the EU, I originate from the EU. The EU has already created an AI Act, so there is regulation possible. I'm not saying regulation is perfect, but at least there is a ability to think ahead and act before you actually put stuff into practice that has not been secured, that has not been made safe and easy and secure to use, right? So I think it's important to step back and rethink the approach to that and not just rush it and be the first, because that hurts everyone. And the end user needs to be in control of their data and not companies that are greedy and want to market my or your or anyone else's data and quickly use it with their latest AI hype. It needs to be done in a sober way. There's business rules and there should be rules for using control certain technologies before we just rush it.
Yeah, and I get that as far as being able to control your data, but like, I'll give you an example. Okay, so when I taught at the college, I taught courses in marketing, and I asked the students there, what their thoughts were about privacy. These were like 20-year-old students, 19, 21, whatever, and they didn't care. Like, to them, the idea of privacy, like the way I had, and maybe in your generation would have had, let's say, would have been like, oh, privacy, like don't talk politics in public, don't talk about religion. I don't want to share my personal info. Why are you sharing photos of you crying and videos online? Like, the idea of privacy is like, there's the personal sphere, then there's our public sphere. And for them, they don't care. Like, everything can be public. And so how do you work that when, sure, the tech companies are taking advantage of all this information, let's say, right? But the user base now, the new generations don't care if they're using it or not. Like, they don't seem to be worried about it. You ask them, do you care that they have your psychographic profile they've developed with algorithms? They know exactly what you like, what you don't like, what your mind, it's like Minority Report. They're prescient. They know exactly what you're thinking now because they've developed such great algos that can online, right? So how do you deal with that when it's like the generational divide is happening, where, oh, you're just, you're old school, you care about these things. It's like, you know, they just don't know the threats. Well, most young kids don't know, right?
Yeah,
But
but I think it's important to then educate them about that, not just accept it that they are not trained, that they're not informed, that they don't know, and probably they were failed in their education system. Maybe we need to refocus them and say, look, this is really important. Here is why. Explain it in the terms that is easy for them to grasp, and then develop a common value system. I think it's not good to just give in just because someone has not been educated smartly and good about privacy and security, then just open up the gates. No, we need to change that attitude. I mean, I have fought for that security and privacy stuff since 30 years, and I would never give up, right? I think it's very important. If the genie is out of the bottle, it's over. And I don't want to lose that war, so to speak.
do you think that it's been a losing war so far, though, just from seeing the amount of information that's out there about people? I mean, you can Google anything really about, you spend some time on the internet, you can find information, phone numbers, addresses, all sorts of stuff.
Yes. So I would say it's still ongoing. We are on a somewhat losing trajectory because of that attitude of greed and fast and speed and all the nonsense that is going on. And a lot of people acting irresponsibly and not practicing good accountability, good stewardship, good citizenship. That's really a problem. Now, I and many others have behaved differently. We are leading the industry and moving it in a better direction. But the problem is that greed in this world oftentimes wins. And then there is a gap of accountability for those people that have basically run away with the rewards and they are not caring for the big issues that they have created. And that's really a problem. The business system there needs to be revamped to some extent.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. So how do you talk to the board and how do you manage upwards to your leadership about these kinds of threats when they're often tied up with their quarterly results? I mean, all business now is you're only as good as your last quarter, right? So
So I think one of the first steps that a good CISO and a good leader anyway will do is really understand the business, understand where the business operates and makes its money and what are the core focus areas. And when you understand that, then you can frame your security strategy or program around that, leveraging that, aligning it and piggybacking with certain initiatives, and then win the board with trust. So that means you first need to educate them. What is the situation? What is the risk about this? Why is this important now? Educate them. And once you have educated them, and build some trust, you can then leverage that for certain initiatives. You should not be Dr. No. That is what I always have said. You need in the security space, you need to be the department of Dr. How, not Dr. No. Dr. No always is no, right? And you can't do that. But what I'm saying is find a way that is better, that is more secure, that is more privacy focused. And then with that, you can lead the game and make it easy for the users and for the adopters of the technology to follow that secure/private path instead of shortcutting it and then ending up in nirvana where nothing goes or anything goes, depending how you look at that. And so I think it's important to find that way to always advise how to do it in the right fashion versus just do it fast.
So is it more of like risk mitigation or risk elimination? Because it seems like you're just trying to find a better of what's the least bad option in some cases,
So
right?
I don't want to say complete risk elimination. That is not possible. That would mean you have to bury your data center into the ground 20 meters or whatever, 100 meters underground. It's not good. What you need to do is really solid and good risk taking. There's good and bad risk, right? A bad risk means it's completely out of control. You don't know what you're doing. You have no idea about what the risk is. While good risk is you understand the risk profile, you understand what kind of risk reward equation is there, and you have eliminated that risk that is not good, that is a bad risk, and you take good risk on. And I think that's the right approach. Understand the risk appetite, understand the risk profile, and then manage that as good and as foreseeable as you can, and have certain response mechanisms if something were to fail.
Makes sense. And so when you're talking with the board and whatnot, like how do you, not to say dumb it down, but how do you make it in the jargon that they would understand? Like what kind of examples do you typically give to people that are non-techie about the risks that are happening, right?
So what I do is use a model. So I often use cars because everyone has a car and everyone understands that. So you can compare it with, does the car have brakes and airbag and ESR and ASP and whatever the acronyms are? What kind of security and privacy controls you have in the car, and then frame it for that specific situation that you are talking about with that, so that there is a common, easy understanding. If you realize the model is not good, then switch to a better one that maybe fits more that purpose. But the idea is to not dumb it down, but put it into words that are really common between multiple different business focused people, and find a way to communicate the oftentimes more complex stuff via that model. That works. And you can put it in business context in some cases. It depends on the situation at hand. But really, you need to be very fast ahead of the curve. When something happens, you need to know, hey, there's this data breach. Is this important? Would this impact us or affect us to some way? What are we doing about it? So that you can answer those board questions early on when you have the next meeting. So be aware what's going on in the market all the time and have a good kind of understanding of it, and then put it into perspective for that company.
No, that's good. And so where do you see like the main issues that are happening in these small, medium businesses? You know, like what's a general, there's got to be, there's usually a pattern, right? The similar type of risk, similar type of, I mean, you start to see it in every business, like it's the same garbage, just a different pile, you know? So
Yes.
what are you seeing now? Like when you say, here's the top 5 things that are happening with medium business, you know?
So, and I don't want to frame it only for small and medium businesses. This happens even for big ones, but I would say it's maybe even more prevalent on the smaller ones. So number one is we are not a target. We are too small. We are not important. No one knows about it. Nonsense. You are a target. In the moment that you have an IP address, you are publicly discoverable. You are reachable via the internet. You are exposed. Yes, you are a target. Absolutely. You're an automated target in the moment that you have an IP address, period. The second one is, well, we don't have time and money for this right now. We can't afford security, and especially we can't afford a CISO. Well, let me tell you this. If you think you cannot afford security or you cannot afford a CISO, you will see once you have your breach that you are out of business. You can't afford that either. So you should be actually more proactive and smart and do security in the beginning to understand what kind of risk profile you have and what you want to tolerate. And then with that, you educate and build your security products and solutions from the ground up with security in mind. So shifting left and putting security there first is really important, instead of just let's build the first product, let's build this first service, and then later down the road we do security. That is why industry is where it is today, because that nonsense approach has led us to the current situation. We need to shift left and have security at the drawing board, at the design stage first, together with the others that develop products, that develop services. Security must have a seat at the table. That's another one that is really a biggie, right? I think important is also about the kind of what you said earlier with the speed and the grid. We need to find ways to communicate to the business entities why is the value for security or privacy there. Put this into dollars and whatever. What is the positive impact if you do security right versus what is the risk that you take if it fails? This kind of conversation needs to happen in the early stages. Even if you are a founder, if you build a new company, think about what data, what kind of information you store about users, about identities, how do you want to secure that, what rights and what regulations are you basically dealing with in different entities, global entities or countries, and then be smart about that and bring on a CISO very first. What I personally don't like is this whole virtual CISO nonsense. In my view, it just proves the point, right? You spend a lot, not as much money for security, and you think you can go away and bypass it with virtual CISO services. In my view, this is contradictory to what I said earlier. You need to do the right things. That means you need a full-time CISO, you need to have a full-time security organization and build that. And it can be small in the beginning. If you're a small company, it's maybe a one-man show or two-man show, but over time, you can really do it in the right fashion and grow together with a company and do the right steps. That is much actually cheaper, much better, and much faster than if you do it the other way around, where you build something and then you crush it, and then you have to suddenly security and bolt on a solution that was never designed with security and privacy in mind in the first place. So my advice to founders and CTOs and CEOs and so forth is have that conversation right at the beginning, not at the end.
So it's an interesting problem that you brought up there about how, and this is a problem with other departments too. So I would say it's very similar to the HR experience where everyone would say HR is a very valued position in the company, very important. But a lot of companies are not spending money on HR. They don't even have an HR director. A lot of times they're bringing in fractional HR help and so on, similar to virtual CISO, because they don't view it as an important part that when we see hiring right now, we're seeing heads of sales, heads of operations leaders. HR is like an afterthought to them. So I would say it's a similar type of view of where they don't view the position as it's not a moneymaker for them. They view it as more of an expense line, right? Oh, we got to pay for insurance. It's an insurance. So how do you change that mindset with people? Because it seems like it's a major education piece in terms of their business, because right now it's viewed as, oh, it's another expense, just like HR is. And if I don't, only the minimum, that's why they'll do the minimum that's required basically to keep it functioning rather than, well, this is part of our strategy. Is that because there's a communication gap with the CISOs and the board? They're not aligned, or is it just the board doesn't care and that's just what it is? What would you say is the problem, or both?
So I would not say the board doesn't care. Of course, not all the board members, actually way too few, are really security experts, but you can educate them. I think there is a gap of alignment. A lot of CISOs in the past have been technical person only, so they are missing the kind of language, the kind of capability to explain it in easy English terms to them. And there's a gap of trust that can be changed. That is why I wrote my new recent book, right? Really educate other CISOs how to do that. It's important that you have that trust building capability and action first when you get hired. You need to develop that trust relationship fast and quickly, and then educate the board. I think what you said about the HR or other such fractional roles, this is really a problem. I think fractional doesn't serve the purpose. Fractional tells you there is a limited focus, and I, as a customer, would not purchase something where I know there was a fractional use case for security, for privacy, or in some cases, maybe HR or other such functions. It's really important to have a solid business that is built soberly from the ground up and with the right functions in place.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I guess that's the thing is, they don't teach you executive presence if you're an IT person. And in general, a lot of IT people are kind of shy and introvert. They may not have the social skills and the the executive presence needed for the C-level, which is a C-level role, right? I think for any C-level person, you need to have that executive presence. So
Yes.
that's something I've seen on the HR side, where a lot of them did not have that business mindset, and they had trouble becoming aligned.
That is something That is something that can be learned. So you can actually
Of
go
course.
into a room and you have to read the room. You need to understand what people are there. You need to understand their background so you can do the research upfront. You need to be able to really frame the answers that you are giving to the business, that you have that focus, right? And then, as I said earlier, building trust. So if you say something, make sure that you deliver and actually over deliver. If you commit something like a timeline or a certain status of something, you need to make sure that you deliver 100%. And then over time, it builds trust. And then you can leverage that trust from your credit bank, so to speak, and a greater ask or for a certain initiative that you either want to do or want to stop and lead into a different direction.
Totally makes sense. And so, how are you seeing on the recruitment side, building your teams, the industry recruitment in general? It seems like cybersecurity hiring, I've seen some crazy salaries. I mean, it seems like there's no limit to how much a good security pro can get paid now. CISO is making over $1 million easy in some cases. So, how is it going with that? What's been your experience with either hiring and also the job market for yourself?
So I think the market is somewhat strange. It is fluctuating. And over the last couple of years, the market is not as strong as it was in the prior years. I agree with you that salaries have been outrageously high for certain security profiles or for certain regions and locations, but it's not across the board. It always depends on the location, on the corporation, on the size of the organization, and so forth, the accountability. And then also with the skill set and the maturity, right? Problem is that oftentimes people coming fresh from university, college, or whatever want to have the same kind of salary that someone that has 30 or 40 years experience, and that is of course not right. And then on the other hand, you have organizations and companies that are trying to be cheap and think they can hire a CISO for a low paid salary that is less than an architect or a whatever security analyst earns, and that's nonsense of course as well. It needs to be really adjusted to the situation, to the size of the corporation, to the location, and to the skill set, to the expertise. And my story is this: you always get what you pay for. Quality always has its price. And if you go cheap, you will not win one of the best CISOs, right? If you want to have a really solid CISO, you need to pay the necessary market price for that person. And that over time gives you then the payback. Like I always pay off my salaries in the first couple of months just by checking the business, finding out what are the weak spots, getting some better negotiations with vendors in place, getting some better contracts in place, better protections, and keeping the company out of the media from bad news. So that pays off within a few weeks and months, so to speak. So it's smart investment.
Yeah, I guess it's always hard with human nature, right? We're the type of always, we don't want to pay until a disaster happens. Then, oh, we got to overcompensate and button down.
Yeah, but look, I mean, to piggyback on what you said earlier, the problem, think about insurance. Like I have my home insurance, I have my car insurance and all other sorts of insurances because I think this is a smart investment. The likelihood that here where I live in Texas, we have hurricanes and thunderstorms and whatever, there is a big risk that something were to happen. So of course I have the money saving my assets, my home and so forth. So similarly for cybersecurity, how can someone just ignore the threat that is there? You can read about that every single day in the media, in Wall Street Journal and all the other big ones. It is common, and we need to basically be proactive. And if you can't do proactiveness, then at least do some insurance. And cybersecurity per se is not only an insurance business, it's way more. It's really proactive. It's part and should become part of the business and really integrate, as I said earlier, from the get-go. And if you're a software development company, make sure that you have secure software development life cycles. I have actually come up with certain approaches, SecDevOps. I intentionally call it SecDevOps versus DevSecOps. So first security, then development, then operations, integrated, of course, across the value chain, and not first development and then security. No way. It is SecDevOps, nothing else. And similarly, in other companies and other businesses, make sure security has that seat at the design table, at the development table, at the technology, as well as the business side, and then get it into the practices of the organization.
Well, and you think they would save some money too if you're building it with security in mind from the get-go. You're not having to go back and redo things because, oh, this is unsafe. Oh, here's the gap, or.
Exactly. It's literally hundredfold. So depending on the research that you can do on that, depending on the corporation and the size, it is less than 100 times cheaper if you do security first, if you do it on the far left, than doing it at the far right in production. That's very costly. And as I said, 100x from a cost perspective. So it's smart to do security right from the get-go.
Yeah, and I guess it's all about framing it in terms of dollars for them. This is how much you're going to save. This is the cost later of doing it.
Yes.
Having some clear numbers is great, right, for those kinds of things. What would be like, the major threats though? For example, you don't know anything about cybersecurity, and you're like, oh, I think we need a CISO, but I really don't know what can happen to us, right? If you're not a bank, you're like, what's going to happen? So what kind of risks are there? Like, what should you be worried about? Are you worried about people taking over your data, crashing your website? What sort of things have you seen with companies that are, mid-size and so on?
So the threats are manifold. You can actually address almost everything in the company. You can steal the data. You can do encryption like ransomware, where you actually encrypt the data and you keep the keys. You will not give the company access to it anymore unless they pay a certain sum. Then the company has to shut down their business for some time. If they don't have backups, and you would not believe even in 2025, there are companies that have no immutable backups yet, then you are really in a bad spot. So you need to make sure that you have immutable backups. You need to make sure that you have certain security solutions to secure your endpoints, your storage environments, your networks, your infrastructure, and so forth. Everything is attackable. As I said earlier, if you have an IP address, you are discoverable. And don't assume just because you put it into the cloud that you are secure. I forgot to say that earlier with small companies. They think, well, we put it in the cloud, it's secure. Nonsense. In the cloud, it's not secure. It's actually more attackable because it's more accessible. You need to make sure you have the right security controls in place for that solution in the cloud. So don't rely on the vendors. They are not doing it right. So it's important that you have your own security around that and for that. And then for the companies, they need to understand where is the biggest value creation in the business, and then make sure that you focus on those areas, those processes, and secure them, and make sure you have a very solid understanding of your assets, how they interact with each other, what the values of the chain is, whatever the money producing for a day, per week, per month is, and then secure it accordingly with a percentage rate of that kind of money that you make from there. That puts it into the right level of risk versus reward equation.
That totally makes sense. And I guess if you've never had a cybersecurity attack of some kind, then you really don't know how bad it can be. But I've heard of the ransoming before. People, unless you pay 100K, you're not getting your computers back. And I think in the news recently too, it was like some schools and some other places have had that happen, and it's unreal. Like, you never think it's going to happen to you, I guess, till it does. Similar with insurance, I never think I'm going to get in a car accident till it happens, right? So that's wild. Um, what do you think about like sort of the new group of people trying to get into becoming a CISO? Like, how would you say you should steer your career? If let's say I finished my master's degree in technology and I'm looking to become a CISO, what kind of path, because I know for yourself, it wasn't a traditional path, I guess, you took either. How do you get to get in that chair? What would you say to new people that are just starting a career, but they think they're going to do that in a year, but really it's like you got to put the time in, right? Just like with anything else. Yeah.
Very true. So that's the problem in our world, right? Everyone wants to have immediate gratification. No, that's nonsense. You don't get from school/university into a CISO seat within a year. No way. That takes decades. And in my view, I mean, I started in software development, administration, IT stuff. And then over the years, I went more and more into securing things, and then I used it as a full-time opportunity. It is maybe not as traditional, but maybe more traditional than some other paths. I also in parallel developed the business mindset and understanding. And then over the years, management and executive presence, all that comes with maturity and learning and speaking in different cultures, different languages, and so forth. I would advise people that are fresh now, either finishing university or college or coming into their first job, make sure that you pick some area that really interests you and then learn that well to the nth degree. You must be an expert in something. And then after some years, find another one and same thing there, become an expert really good. And then after maybe 5 years, make sure you have some sort of people management capability and skills and develop that further. And then over the years, maybe after 8 to 9, 10 years, merge it together and take on a role that is combining leadership with security, with technology, with business. And then maybe it sets you up for that path. And I can't foresee the future, what is going on in 5 or 10 or 20 years, but I think the methodology and the approach will still work. So You need to be really good at what you do. You need to have expert level understanding. You need to become a leader. And that is not only naturally given, but you can learn that to some extent and make sure you hone that skill and you build that and develop that. Never stop learning, really, never stop learning. Don't sit on your laurels forever. You need to be re-challenging and resetting and reinventing yourself from time to time, and make sure that you build on and upgrade and basically develop yourself further on. And that means oftentimes career changes, direction changes, find opportunities, and then piggyback on those opportunities and see what you can make out of that. But there is no guaranteed path, right? It is preparation and excellence, and then putting it all together at the right moment in time, and then leveraging the skills and the expertise and the knowledge and know-how that you have built, that then presents yourself for the opportunity, and then you can pick it and do it.
Yeah, is there like getting certified, and obviously as a pro would be one for sure. People management skills, all that is definitely important. So there is definitely some basic building blocks you would need, right? And
Yes.
how do you find the talent pipeline right now for these kind of candidates? I mean, I know there's a lot of internships, there's apprenticeships, and so on. There's a lot of courses they're offering with like ed courses that are paid by the company. Then they offer you a job after to get into IT and whatnot. But how is the pipeline looking? Would you say, for the next 10 years?
I can't speak to that. I don't have too much insights. I'm not on the HR recruiting business, right?
Yeah,
What I can say is, as a potential candidate or someone that is interested in that career path, prepare yourself with different skills and with different abilities and know-how and knowledge. Build that over the years. That prepares you to then, when the opportunity comes, you can really jump in and do it and take it. If you're unprepared and you come into that situation, you will later regret it. Hey, I should have done more in the beginning. So just make sure when you are fresh from college, university, education, high school, whatever it is, that you build your skill set, that you build your capabilities, and that you get better and better by every week, every month, every year.
that's great. So, final thoughts, let's say, what would you say is biggest challenge coming up for CISOs and biggest opportunity, for them?
So let me say one other thing I haven't said that yet. I actually talked about that in my book, but what I find crazy, and I want to give a warning to these people that are fresh from college, I think the hype in the industry about awards and about greatest CISO on the planet and whatever CISO of the year is actually contradictory and is not good for us as a community. Don't come here for the rewards, for the awards, for the hype, but be there for really professional, for the idea and for the willingness to secure the world, make it more private focused, make it better for a community, instead of going here for the dollars, for the fast track, for the I want to be that in 2 years. That's nonsense. You need to be professional first. You need to be really well educated, really continuously hone your skills and form your character. And then down the road, this comes almost by itself. You present and prepare yourself for that opportunity, but don't go here for the quick money. Don't do what many companies do. It drives me nuts. They are just here to make money with no really value system and no really good guidance and governance. So that's definitely an approach I want to share with the community. So for the
Yeah.
future, I would say, sorry for interrupting.
Oh, go
For
ahead.
the future, I would say we need to have more data-centric security. So it's in the first decades, we have secured systems. Then now we are doing identity, like securing identities and maybe users. And I think what we still are lacking is securing the data. And maybe the quantum technology will give us some opportunity there, that only the person like myself, I can access the data with certain quantum controls. That could be a future path forward that I can foresee.
No, it's interesting, and there's a lot of new tools coming out. Is there any hot new AI tool that you're using, or something that's helpful?
No, I would be careful to share too much with any of the AI tools, regardless which one, Grok or ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever it is. Be careful with what you put in there, because there's no privacy, there's no security controls around it, and companies have again dramatically failed to secure those kind of systems. So be careful what you put in. Don't trust any AI system and use that as your best friend or advisor for your life. Just take it with a grain of salt and be very careful what you put in there. That's very, very important at the current stages.
Well, we're all training up AI to replace us, right?
No, I don't see that as a replacement. I see it actually as an addendum, as an add-on, as another feature. It's just another key on your keyboard, so to speak, where you have an AI co-pilot or whatever you want to call it, where you can ask certain questions and it can take certain tasks for you, the mundane tasks, so that you can do actually focus on the really intelligence-driven. But in my view, the AI is far away from the true AI, where you really have cognitive abilities and that kind of true thinking ability. What it's currently, it's about likelihoods and how likely is the next word coming in that phrase. It's all math, it's all statistics. It's not really smart and intelligence in that form. We are
Yeah,
far
I
from that.
guess that's what a lot of people don't understand what machine learning is versus true general intelligence, the AGI that they're talking about, which is like from the science fiction movies. Skynet was AGI. It wasn't machine learning, so don't worry, not yet. But I think that's also just, unless you're following Star Trek and you're very tech oriented, like this stuff, it just flies over your head, right? Like you talk to the layman, they don't know. They're like, oh, we have AI. You know but it's not as it's not where it needs to be to be a big threat. Let's say right now it's pretty dumb. It can't really think for itself. As you said, it's using algorithms and code to figure out what sounds good based on 100 other examples and precedents, right? So it's chopping things up, but I mean it's gotten pretty good. You see it's been improving pretty fast. It's interesting. I think we're just about to finish up. Any final words for the audience today?
So first of all, thanks for having me. Great conversation. I really enjoyed this, and I look forward for maybe another interview in this show. Best of luck to you in this installment, and yeah, pleasure to have you
Yeah, it's
and to
good
be
to
here.
have you too. Appreciate it.